Don't ever open that cabin, Frank. Swear to me. My wife, Helen, whispered those words to me every year when we drove past the Smoky Mountains on our way to visit her sister. She'd grip my hand so tight her knuckles turned white, and her eyes would go somewhere far away, somewhere I could never follow. After her death from pancreatic cancer, her attorney handed me a rusted key and told me the mountain property was now mine. Helen had always called it a rotting shack from her family's past, not worth the property taxes. So I figured I'd drive up, take some pictures, and list it with the first realtor who'd answer the phone. But when I turned that key and pushed open the door, my legs gave out. Because that rotting shack was a fully renovated 3-bedroom lodge worth well over $1 million. And Helen hadn't just left me a secret house. She'd left me a locked room in the basement containing evidence that would tear my family apart and put people I loved behind bars. If you think you already know what I found behind that locked door, drop your guess in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I buried my wife on a Thursday in late October, the kind of crisp Tennessee morning she would have loved. The maples along our street in Knoxville had turned that deep amber Helen always called God's favorite color. 41 years of marriage, and I still couldn't look at fall leaves without hearing her voice. Helen Parker had been the quiet center of everything. She taught 4th grade for 28 years at the same elementary school, baked pies for every neighbor who got sick, and never once raised her voice in anger. But about that cabin in the mountains, she was immovable. A wall of silence I learned early in our marriage not to push against. It's nothing, Frank. Just an old place my grandfather built before the Depression. The roof's caved in. The land's worthless. Let it rot. So I let it rot. I had no reason to doubt my wife. Helen didn't lie. Helen didn't hide things. Helen was the most honest person I'd ever known, or so I believed for 4 decades. The funeral brought our children home. My eldest, Nathan, flew in from Chicago, where he ran some kind of investment consulting firm. At 40, he had his mother's sharp mind and a confidence that sometimes crossed into arrogance. My second son, Tyler, drove down from Atlanta, 37, always chasing the next deal, always talking about money like it was oxygen. And my daughter, Sophie, came from Nashville. At 33, she was the only one who'd stayed close enough to visit regularly. She had Helen's gentle way about her, that gift for making everyone feel heard. They stayed 3 days after the funeral. Nathan handled the finances with cold efficiency. Tyler asked twice about the life insurance policy. Sophie cleaned the house and cooked meals I couldn't eat. Then, one by one, they went back to their lives, and I was alone with a silence so heavy it had weight. 2 weeks later, Helen's attorney, Douglas Webb, called me into his office on Gay Street downtown. Doug was old-school Knoxville, bow ties and bourbon on his bookshelf, the kind of lawyer who still shook hands to seal a deal. Frank, Helen left very specific instructions. He slid a manila envelope across his desk. Inside was a property deed, a rusted brass key, and a handwritten letter in Helen's careful cursive. The deed described 40 acres in Sevier County, about an hour east of Knoxville, bordering the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She purchased this land from her cousin's estate 12 years ago, Doug said. 12 years? I stared at him. She told me it was her grandfather's old place, said it was worthless. Doug removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, the way people do when they're choosing words carefully. Helen asked me to keep the purchase confidential. She paid cash from an inheritance her aunt left her directly, money that never passed through your joint accounts. I respected her wishes as her personal attorney. How much is the property worth? Based on current Sevier County valuations and the improvements she's made over the years, Doug paused, consulting a document. Conservatively, the land and structures are worth around $1.2 million. But Frank, there's something else. Recent geological assessments indicate significant lithium deposits on the property. Several mining companies have expressed interest. We're potentially looking at $60 to $80 million in mineral rights. I couldn't breathe. Helen. My Helen, who drove a 12-year-old Camry and reused aluminum foil, who told me we couldn't afford to replace the back porch steps last summer. She'd been sitting on a fortune and never said a word. I opened her letter that night, sitting in the recliner she'd bought me for our 30th anniversary. Her handwriting was shaky, written during her final weeks when the cancer had stolen most of her strength. My dearest Frank, If you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the secret I've kept and for the ones you're about to discover. Please go to the cabin before you do anything else. Everything I couldn't say out loud is waiting for you there. You're going to be angry. You have every right. But please remember that every choice I made was to protect the people I love, even when protection looked like lying. I love you. I have always loved you. Helen. I left before sunrise the next morning. The drive through the foothills was beautiful in that painful way nature has of being gorgeous when your heart is breaking. The GPS took me off the main highway onto a county road, then onto a gravel path that wound up through dense hardwood forest. When I rounded the final curve, I had to pull over and just stare. This was no rotting shack. A handsome lodge built from local stone and timber sat in a clearing overlooking a valley that stretched toward the blue ridgeline of the Smokies. The porch was wide, the windows were new, and smoke was rising from somewhere on the property, which meant someone was here. A woman stepped off the porch as I parked. Mid-50s, strong build, wearing work boots and a flannel shirt. She looked like someone who'd spent her life outdoors. "Mr. Parker, I'm June Hollis. I've been the property manager here for 11 years. Your wife told me you'd come eventually." June showed me through the lodge. Helen had renovated it from the foundation up, turning her grandfather's Depression-era cabin into something elegant but warm. The furniture was comfortable, the kitchen was stocked, and the walls held photographs I'd never seen. Pictures of Helen as a young woman standing on this very porch with people I didn't recognize. "She came up here once a month," June said. "Told you she was visiting her sister in Asheville, I imagine." "She did," I admitted, feeling the ground shift beneath everything I thought I knew. June led me to the back of the property, where a modern barn housed equipment for monitoring the land. She explained the lithium discovery, how a survey team from a mining company had approached Helen 3 years ago, how Helen had quietly negotiated preliminary agreements worth tens of millions. "She was sharp," June said with admiration. "Made those corporate lawyers work for every clause. But she kept pushing the final signing back. Said she wasn't ready. Said there were things she needed to handle first." "What things?" June hesitated. "Mr. Parker, your wife left something for you in the basement of the lodge. She made me promise I'd take you there myself when you came. Said it would explain everything." The basement stairs led down to a finished room that looked like a private office. Bookshelves lined the walls, a heavy oak desk sat in the center, and a large monitor was mounted on the far wall. But what stopped me cold was the filing cabinet in the corner, industrial grade, the kind you'd see in a police evidence room, with a biometric lock that June opened with a code Helen had left. Inside were dozens of folders, organized with color-coded tabs in Helen's meticulous system, and taped to the inside of the cabinet door was a USB drive labeled "For Frank. Play first." June left me alone. I plugged the drive into the computer, and Helen's face filled the screen. Not the hollow version from her final months, but the vibrant woman I remembered from before the diagnosis. Her silver hair was pulled back, her eyes clear and focused. "Hello, my love," she said, and I broke down before she could say another word. "I know you're confused and probably furious, and you deserve to be, but I need you to hear everything before you decide what to do. What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt Frank. It's going to make you question our entire marriage. But every piece of evidence in this room, every document, every recording, I gathered because I love our family too much to let it be destroyed by the choices our sons have made." She took a breath, and I watched her steady herself the way she used to before parent-teacher conferences with difficult families. "Nathan has been running a fraud operation through his consulting firm for the past 5 years. He takes money from small business owners promising to invest in commercial real estate developments that don't exist. He's stolen over $12 million from people who trusted him, Frank. Retirees, veterans, families who gave him their savings. My eldest son, the boy who'd graduated summa cum laude, who wore $3,000 suits and talked about integrity in his LinkedIn posts." Helen continued. "Tyler has been helping Nathan launder the stolen money through a chain of car washes he owns in Atlanta. The businesses are real, but half the revenue they report is fictional. Tyler processes Nathan's stolen funds and takes a 30% cut. I felt sick. Both my sons. Both of them. I discovered this 2 years ago," Helen said. I was going through old files, looking for tax documents, when I found a statement Nathan had accidentally left at the house during Christmas. The numbers didn't add up. I started digging, and what I found made me physically ill. I hired a private investigator, former Secret Service agent named Dale Meeks, out of Chattanooga. Dale spent 14 months documenting everything. Every transaction, every fake LLC, every victim. It's all in the filing cabinet. She leaned closer to the camera. I wanted to turn them in, Frank. I almost did. But then I found out something about Tyler that changed everything. The screen cut to a second video file. Helen's expression had shifted from determined to devastated. Tyler has stage 3 colon cancer. He was diagnosed 8 months ago and has been hiding it from everyone. He's been flying to Houston for treatment, paying cash to keep it off insurance records. The prognosis without aggressive treatment is 2 to 3 years. With treatment, his doctors are cautiously optimistic, but he needs surgery and a year of chemotherapy. She wiped her eyes. I can't send my dying son to prison, Frank, but I can't let them keep stealing from innocent people either. That's why I bought back this land. That's why I've been building this case. The lithium money, it's enough to pay back every single victim and still leave our family secure. I wanted to give Nathan and Tyler a chance to make it right, to return the money, shut down the operation, and face what they've done before the law catches up to them. But then the cancer came for me too, and I ran out of time. I sat in that basement until midnight, going through Helen's files. The evidence was devastating and airtight. Bank records, wire transfers, recorded phone conversations where Nathan casually discussed moving money through Tyler's car washes, spreadsheets listing victims by name, age, and amount stolen, many of them elderly, many of them veterans like me. Helen had organized everything with the precision of a woman who knew she was dying and needed someone to finish what she'd started. Each folder had a summary page, each recording had a transcript. She'd even drafted letters to every victim, explaining how they would be repaid. My wife had spent the last 2 years of her life building a case against our own sons, while simultaneously planning their salvation. The weight of what she'd carried alone was almost incomprehensible. June brought me coffee at 2 a.m. "Found what you needed?" she asked. "I found more than I ever wanted to know," I said. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched more of Helen's videos. There were 36 in total, recorded over 6 months, each one addressing a different aspect of the crisis. How to approach the mining companies, how to structure the victim repayment fund, how to handle Nathan's temper when confronted, how to get Tyler into proper cancer treatment without him feeling ashamed. But it was video 29 that destroyed me. Helen's face was drawn, and I could tell this was recorded near the end, when the cancer was winning. She spoke slowly, choosing each word, like it cost her something. "There's one more thing I need to tell you, Frank. Something I've carried for 37 years. When Tyler was conceived, you were deployed in Kuwait for 8 months. I told you he came early, that he was premature. The doctors backed up my story because I begged them to. But Tyler wasn't premature, Frank. He was full term. Tyler isn't your biological son." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles cracked. "His father was a man named Richard Dawson. He was a contractor who did work on the house while you were overseas. It happened once, Frank. One night when I was lonely and scared and certain you were never coming home. I have regretted it every single day of my life." Helen was openly weeping now. "Richard moved to Oregon years ago. He never knew about Tyler. But when I learned about the cancer, I had a DNA analysis done through Dale, and Richard is a potential bone marrow match if Tyler ever needs a transplant. His contact information is in the red folder. He's a good man who made one mistake with a lonely military wife 37 years ago." She pressed her palm against the camera lens, a gesture so intimate it felt like she was touching my face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Tyler deserves to live, and he deserves a father, the father you've always been. Please don't let my sin destroy the love you have for our son. He didn't choose any of this." The screen went dark, and I sat in the silence of my dead wife's secret basement, trying to figure out how to breathe when the air had been sucked out of the world. I didn't tell my children what I knew. Not yet. I spent 3 days at the cabin, reading every file, watching every video, walking the property with June, until I understood the full scope of Helen's plan. She'd thought of everything. The mining contracts, the repayment fund, the legal framework for turning Nathan and Tyler's crimes into a restitution story rather than a prison sentence. But on the fourth day, my phone rang. Nathan's name on the screen. Dad. His voice was tight. We need to talk. Tyler and I are driving down this weekend. We know about the cabin. How? That doesn't matter. What matters is Mom left property worth millions and you're sitting on it alone. We have a right to know what's going on. I wasn't surprised. Nathan had always been the first to smell money. They arrived Saturday morning. Nathan's BMW looked ridiculous on the gravel road. Tyler's pickup was more practical, but his face when he stepped out was gray with pain he was trying to hide. Sophie drove up an hour later, alerted by Tyler, confused but loyal as always. We sat on the lodge porch, the mountains stretching out before us in layers of autumn gold. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Nathan opened his laptop and started talking about asset division, like we were in a boardroom. Mom clearly intended this for the family, he said. We should liquidate the mining rights immediately. I have contacts who can facilitate. I let him talk for 10 minutes. I let Tyler nod along, adding numbers. I let Sophie sit quietly, watching her brothers with growing unease. Then I set Helen's filing cabinet key on the table between us. Before we discuss anything, I said, I need you boys to explain something to me. Nathan's smile didn't waver. Explain what? Explain how my eldest son stole $12 million from working people, and how my other son has been washing that money through fake revenue at his car washes in Atlanta. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard. Tyler went white. Nathan's mask cracked for just a second before he tried to recover. Dad, I don't know what Mom told you, but she was sick. She was confused at the end. You can't possibly believe. I opened the folder I'd prepared. Bank statements, wire transfers, recorded transcripts. I spread them across the table like a dealer laying out cards. Your mother wasn't confused. She hired a former Secret Service investigator. She spent 14 months building a case that any federal prosecutor would frame and hang on their wall. Nathan stood up so fast his chair fell backward. This is insane. You're going to take the word of a dead woman over your own sons? I'm taking the word of bank records, recorded conversations, and 147 pages of documentation. Tyler hadn't moved. He was staring at the papers with the expression of a man watching a building collapse in slow motion. Dad, he said quietly, it's not what you think. Tell me what it is then. Nathan tried to interrupt, but Tyler raised his hand. It started because of the medical bills. My insurance wouldn't cover the treatments I needed. Nathan offered to help, said he had a way to generate cash quickly. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared, Dad. I was dying and nobody knew. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. Tyler, you're sick? He couldn't look at her. Stage 3. Colon. I've been doing chemo in Houston for 8 months. The anger I'd been holding for 3 days softened into something more complicated. My son was a criminal, and he was dying. Both things were true at the same time. That doesn't excuse $12 million stolen from retirees, I said, keeping my voice steady. People who trusted you, Nathan. Veterans. Teachers. Families who handed you their savings because you looked them in the eye and lied. Nathan's arrogance finally crumbled. His shoulders dropped and he looked, for the first time in years, like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. I know, he whispered. I know what I've done. Sophie was crying. She looked at her brothers like she was seeing strangers. How could you? How could you do this to people? To Dad. Mom died carrying this burden because of what you did. That hit them both harder than anything I'd said. I let the silence sit for a long time. Then I laid out Helen's plan. The lithium rights, conservatively valued at $60 million. The restitution fund she'd designed. The legal pathway Dale Meeks had mapped out with a white-collar defense attorney in Chattanooga, one that involved full cooperation with federal investigators, return of all stolen funds, and guilty pleas to reduce charges. You'll both face consequences, I said. Your mother's plan gives you a chance to make this right, but it's not a free pass. You'll cooperate with the investigation. You'll pay back every cent. You'll do whatever time the judge decides, and you'll look every one of those victims in the eye and apologize. Nathan shook his head slowly. Dad, federal charges. We're talking years in prison. My career, my reputation. Your reputation? I said, and I let the full weight of my anger show for the first time. You stole from a 78-year-old widow in Chattanooga. You took the retirement savings of a Purple Heart veteran in Memphis. Your reputation died the day you cashed those checks. He flinched like I'd struck him. Good. Sophie stood and walked to the porch railing. Papa, she said quietly, using the name she hadn't called me since childhood. There's no version of this where they just walk away, is there? No, I said, but there's a version where they walk through it and come out the other side as men their mother wouldn't be ashamed of. Tyler was the first to break. He put his face in his hands and sobbed. Not the dramatic crying of someone performing remorse, but the ugly, shaking collapse of a man who'd been carrying too many secrets for too long. I didn't go to him. Not yet. He needed to feel the weight of what he'd done before I could help him carry it. That night, after Nathan and Tyler had gone to the guest rooms and Sophie was asleep on the couch, I went back to Helen's basement. I played her final video. She looked exhausted but peaceful, like someone who'd set down a burden she'd carried across a desert. If you've made it this far, she said, then you know everything. The money, the crimes, the lies, and the truth about Tyler. I'd been dreading this moment. I know I should have told you decades ago, but every time I tried, I'd watch you teaching Tyler to throw a football or helping him with his science projects, and I couldn't do it. You were his father in every way that mattered. Biology is just chemistry, Frank. What you gave that boy was something no DNA test can measure. She paused, then smiled the smile I'd fallen in love with 41 years ago. The lithium money can fix the financial damage our sons caused, but only you can fix the family. You've always been the strong one, Frank, the steady one. I'm sorry I left you with this mess, but I know you'll do the right thing because you always have. I didn't tell Tyler the truth about his paternity. Not then. That conversation came 3 months later, after his surgery in Houston, after Nathan had turned himself in to federal prosecutors, after Sophie had taken leave from her job to manage the restitution fund that was slowly, painstakingly returning stolen money to every victim on Helen's list. We were sitting on the cabin porch, Tyler wrapped in a blanket, still thin from chemo but with color returning to his face. The mountains were covered in snow, and the quiet was the good kind, the kind that comes after a storm passes. There's one more thing Mom left for me to tell you, I said. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he stared at the mountains for a long time. Does it change anything? He finally asked. Between us? Not a single thing, I said. You've been my son for 37 years. That's not something a lab test can undo. He nodded slowly. What about the other guy? Richard? He lives in Oregon. He doesn't know about you. Your mother left his contact information in case you ever need it medically, for bone marrow or anything related to your treatment. But the choice is yours. There's no pressure either way. Tyler was quiet for another minute. Then he said, I'd like to meet him someday. Not to replace you. Nobody could replace you. But if I have a biological father out there, I think I'd want to know what kind of man he is. I think your mother would have liked that, I said. Nathan served 14 months in a federal minimum security facility. He wrote personal apology letters to every victim, 106 in total. Some wrote back. Most didn't. But the restitution fund, backed by the lithium mining royalties Helen had set up, returned every stolen dollar with interest. Tyler received a reduced sentence of community service and probation, his cooperation and medical condition factoring into the judge's decision. He started a nonprofit helping cancer patients navigate financial assistance programs, turning his worst experience into something that helped others. Sophie became the executor of Helen's estate and the family's moral compass, a role she'd been playing since childhood without anyone acknowledging it. She made sure the mining operation was managed responsibly, that the land Helen had loved was protected, and that a scholarship fund in Helen's name was established at the school where she'd taught for nearly 3 decades. As for Richard Dawson, Tyler met him the following spring. I wasn't there for that conversation, and I didn't ask for details. But Tyler came home with a quiet peace about him, and that was enough. I still drive up to the cabin most weekends. I sit on the porch with coffee and watch the mountains change color with the seasons. Sometimes I talk to Helen, out loud like she's sitting in the chair beside me. I tell her about the boys, about Sophie's wedding plans, about the letters from victims thanking us for making them whole. I tell her I'm still angry sometimes, that the lies still sting on certain nights when the house is too quiet, and I remember she chose to carry all of it alone instead of trusting me to help. But mostly I tell her she was right. About the land, about the plan, about family being something you build with your hands and your heart, not something you inherit through blood. Looking back on everything that happened after Helen died, I realize how close I came to letting rage destroy what was left of my family. When I found out about Nathan and Tyler's crimes, my first instinct was to call the FBI myself and let them rot. When I learned about the affair, I wanted to drive to Oregon and put my fist through Richard Dawson's face. But Helen's voice kept coming back to me from those videos, calm and steady, reminding me that justice and revenge are not the same thing. Don't be like I almost was, friends. Don't let the worst thing someone did become the only thing you see when you look at them. My sons committed serious crimes, and they faced real consequences. My wife lied to me for decades, and I had to grieve the marriage I thought I had before I could appreciate the one I actually lived. None of that was easy. None of it was painless. But my family is still standing. Damaged, yes. Different, absolutely, but standing. Helen's cabin in the Smokies became the place where broken people learned to put themselves back together. Not because the mountains have magic, but because sometimes you need to get away from everything you thought you knew in order to see what actually matters. The lithium mines are operating now, carefully, with environmental protections Helen insisted on in her contracts. The money flows into the restitution fund, into Sophie's scholarship program, into Tyler's nonprofit, into good things built on the wreckage of bad choices. If this story reached you, if any part of it stayed with you, share it with someone who's carrying a secret they think will destroy their family. It might, but it also might be the first step towards something honest. And honest, even when it's ugly, is always better than a beautiful lie. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about life, love, and the hard lessons that make us better. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to forgive someone for something you thought was unforgivable? I'd love to hear your story.